A poor girl sells candy in the rain to buy medicine. The young billionaire notices her torn school uniform and asks, "Why aren't you in school?" She answers, crying, "School can wait, but my little sister can't. I need money for medicine." Upon hearing this, the billionaire falls to his knees in tears and changes their future. The rain fell mercilessly over the city. Large drops pounded against the asphalt, creating a constant rhythm that matched the hurried steps of Asher Reynolds. He was leaving yet another business meeting, weary of numbers and charts that, although impressive, did not fill the emptiness he carried inside. At 32 years old, Asher had built an empire. His technology company was worth billions, and his name graced the covers of the most important business magazines in the world. From abandoned orphan to respected billionaire, his trajectory seemed like a modern fairy tale, except for the fact that something essential was missing. As he walked under his black umbrella, he observed the city around him. People ran for shelter from the rain, entering cafes, stores, or simply opening their own colorful umbrellas. The world continued in its frenetic motion, indifferent to the rain or to the restlessness of a wealthy man. That was when his eyes fell upon her. A girl, maybe 11 or 12, stood on the corner. Unlike the others, she did not seek shelter. She wore a visibly worn school uniform with the emblem of some local public school. The white shirt was stained, and the navy blue skirt had a tear at the hem. Her brown hair, soaked, clung to her pale face. In her small hands, she held a transparent box filled with colorful candies. Instead of shouting to attract the attention of passers-by, she merely stayed there, silent, her eyes lowered. Asher should have continued on his way. That was what he always did. Seeing people in difficult situations was part of daily life in any big city. Long ago, he had learned to block out these sights, to move forward without letting them affect him. But something about that girl made him stop. Perhaps it was the school uniform, which revealed she should be somewhere else. Perhaps it was her eyes, so resigned for someone so young. Or maybe it was the fact that, despite the rain and the cold, she stood there, resolute, as if she carried an invisible weight. Asher found himself slowing his pace. Then he stopped altogether. "Hey, shouldn't you be in school?" The question came out more abruptly than he had intended. The girl slowly lifted her gaze, showing no surprise. Her deep brown eyes lacked the typical sparkle of childhood. "School can wait. My little sister can't. I need to buy her medicine." This answer, said with disconcerting maturity, hit Asher like a punch. Something inside him shattered at that moment. He felt his throat tighten and his eyes burn as unexpected tears formed. He tried to hide it by turning his face to the side, but a single tear escaped, mixing with the rain running down his face. It was not the first time he heard sad stories. He himself had lived one, but there was something in the simplicity of that phrase that completely broke down his defenses. The mention of medicine brought back painful memories of his own childhood, when his mother fell ill and they had no money for her treatment. "How much for the candy?" he asked after a few seconds, attempting to recover his composure, his voice still thick with emotion. $2 for the small pack, $5 for the large one." She pointed to the different options in the box, without enthusiasm. Asher looked more closely at the girl. Her hands were red and rough. Under her soaked uniform, she trembled slightly but tried to hide it. Her shoes were worn, the leather cracked in some spots, allowing water to seep in and drench her feet. In that moment, Asher saw himself 30 years earlier, a frightened boy who had lost everything and who had to grow up too fast. As boy who knew hunger, cold, and the desperation of having nowhere to turn. "What's your name?" he asked, extending his umbrella to shield her from the rain. The girl hesitated before responding, as though she were weighing the risks of revealing her name to a stranger. "Lily," she said at last, quietly. "Lily," Asher repeated, as though testing the sound of that name. "My name is Asher." She nodded, not showing any real interest. To her, he was merely another potential customer, someone who might buy her candy out of pity or a desire for something sweet. Asher could have bought all the candy. He could have emptied his wallet right then and there, but something stopped him. That wasn't the way to help, not the only way, at least. Instead, he pulled out his fine leather wallet. From it, he took out a $100 bill, folded it carefully, and held it out to Lily. I don't have change, she said, knitting her brow. It's not for the candy, Asher replied, still holding out the bill. It's for you. Lily's eyes widened for an instant, but soon narrowed in suspicion. She looked at the bill, then back at Asher's face, clearly trying to discern his intentions. Why? She asked, not taking the money. A simple question that had no simple answer. Why help a stranger? Why care? Why stop in the rain when he could be in his warm car, heading back to the comfort of his home? Because someone did this for me once, Asher replied, aware that it was not the complete truth, but it was part of it. The girl hesitated for a few seconds, then carefully took the bill, as if fearing it would disappear between her fingers. She quickly slid it into her shirt pocket. Thank you, she muttered. Asher nodded, feeling a lump in his throat that he could not explain. He wanted to ask more, where she lived, what her sister was like, why she was selling candy instead of going to school, but something told him it was not the right moment. Try not to stay out in the rain too long, he merely said, offering a small smile. Lily did not smile back. She only nodded almost imperceptibly. Asher hesitated, but began walking away. After a few steps, he looked back. Lily was still there, in the rain, holding her box of candy. Their eyes met briefly. Then she looked away, once again focusing on the wet pavement. As he walked to his car, Asher felt something strange in his chest. A sensation of emptiness, of incompletion, as if he had left something important behind. Something had broken inside him, a barrier perhaps, one he had kept up for years. He remembered his own childhood, the cold nights during which his mother had no money for rent, the days when they went to sleep hungry. He remembered the years in the orphanage after her death, the isolation, the constant sense of belonging to nothing and no one. Then he thought of Lily, of the sister she had mentioned, of the untold stories they must harbor, of the silent suffering they carried. Once he was in his car, Asher noticed his hands were trembling slightly. It was not because of the cold or the rain. It was because he had encountered someone who, like him, was fighting to survive in a world that seemed to have forgotten her, and because he knew deep down that $100 would not be enough. Not for Lily, and not for the wound that had just opened inside him. Asher's apartment occupied the top 2 floors of one of the most exclusive buildings in the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the urban lights that, by that time of night, resembled fallen stars onto the earth. Everything was impeccable, as always. The minimalist decor, chosen by a renowned interior designer, combined neutral tones with carefully selected pieces of contemporary art. The temperature was perfect, the lighting soft, the background music played at a discreet volume. Asher set his leather briefcase on the coffee table and loosened his tie. He helped himself to an expensive whiskey, a gift from an important client, and walked to the window. Outside, the rain kept coming down. He should have been relaxed. The day had been productive. He had closed a multi-million-dollar deal, his company's stock had gone up, and his assistant had already arranged the schedule for the next day. But he could not relax. He could not get Lily, the candy-selling girl, out of his mind. Her eyes, far too serious for someone so young, her wet clothes, her comment about her sick sister. School can wait. My little sister can't. I need money to buy her medicine. Asher closed his eyes tightly, as if that might erase the memory. It wasn't the first time he had seen children in dire situations. The city was full of them, so why did this particular girl affect him so much? He took a sip of whiskey, feeling the liquid burn his throat. He tried focusing on the next day's meeting, on the strategies he needed to devise, on the emails he had yet to answer. It was no use, because along with the image of Lily, other images emerged from the depths of his memory. Images he had locked away for years, as if in a vault he had sworn never to open again. He recalled himself at 8, sitting on the cold floor of the small apartment he shared with his mother. She coughed on the makeshift bed in the living room. No money for doctors. He himself would sneak out to beg for food at restaurant doors. Then at 10 in the orphanage after his mother died. The worn uniform. The nights he cried silently so no one would hear. The constant feeling of not belonging anywhere. Asher opened his eyes abruptly and swallowed the remaining drink in one gulp. He set the glass down on the table with more force than necessary. "Stop this," he told himself aloud. "You can't save the world." That was what his therapist always told him in the years he still attended therapy. That he could not bear the weight of all the world's injustices, that he had to accept that some things were beyond his control. Asher had accepted that advice. He had learned to focus on his own journey, to build his life, to turn his pain into fuel for success. And he had succeeded. From abandoned boy to powerful man, from victim to victor. It was a good story, one that business magazines loved to tell. But now, in that apartment that was far too quiet, the story felt hollow. Asher went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face. In the mirror, he confronted his own reflection. A handsome, well-dressed 32-year-old man with eyes that revealed the fatigue of someone who had seen too much. "What do you want to do then?" he asked his reflection. "Adopt all the kids in the city?" There was no answer. He went back to the living room, sat on the sofa and turned on the TV, hoping some program might distract him. But after surfing through dozens of channels without really seeing anything, he gave up. He picked up his phone, opened his contacts list, considered calling someone, maybe the model he had gone out with the week before, or a friend who was up for a few drinks. Anything to avoid being alone with his thoughts. But instead, he found himself searching for David Lewis's contact, his lawyer, and one of the few genuine friends he had. "Asher?" David's sleepy voice indicated that he had been asleep. "Something happened." "Sorry about the late hour, David. Asher hesitated. What was he going to say? That he was obsessed over a girl who sold candy in the rain. "I needed to talk to someone." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. "You okay?" David asked, now sounding more alert. "Yes, Asher ran his hand through his hair, frustrated by his own inability to express what he felt. "Remember that assistance program you suggested last year? For underprivileged children? The New Start Foundation? Yes, I remember. Why? I want to make a donation. A large one." "That's great, Asher, but..." David paused. "Couldn't this wait until tomorrow?" Asher closed his eyes again. He pictured Lily, shivering in the rain. Pictured himself, small and terrified. "No," he responded firmly. "It can't wait." After hanging up, Asher felt strangely light, as if he had made an important decision, even though he did not yet know exactly what it was. He went to his office, turned on his computer, and began researching. On child assistance programs, on the foster system, on clinics offering free medical treatment, on anything that might help Lily and her sister. He was aware that he might never see that girl again, that she might have vanished into the vastness of the city, that even the massive donation he had promised to make would probably not reach her directly. But he had to try. He had to do something, anything to ease the discomfort settling in his chest like an open wound. In the early morning hours, when daylight began to appear outside, Asher had a plan. It was not perfect or fully formed, but it was a start. He would find Lily again. He would learn more about her and her sick sister, and then, somehow, he would help them. Not out of pity, not to feel better about himself, not to soothe his conscience, but because, for a brief moment in the rain, that girl had reminded him who he really was beneath all the layers of success and money. A survivor who understood the pain of abandonment better than he cared to admit. The next morning, Asher woke before his alarm. He had slept little, only a few restless hours filled with confused dreams in which Lily's face appeared repeatedly, her serious eyes pleading for help she could not articulate. He got up and went to the window. The day was grey, with heavy clouds promising more rain. Perfect, he thought, a day that matched the mission ahead of him. He took a quick shower and dressed simply. No expensive suits or brand-name watches. He chose jeans, a t-shirt, a basic jacket, and a cap to partially conceal his face. He did not want to be recognized, not today. While having coffee, he called his personal assistant. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds. Your meeting with the investors is confirmed for 9 Oak." "Cancel everything," Asher interrupted, leaving no room for discussion in his tone. "Everything." The assistant could not hide his surprise. "But the meeting with the Japanese has been scheduled for months and—" "Everything, Marcus. Personal emergency." "I'll be out all day." There was a moment of silence on the other end. "Understood, sir. Any other instructions?" "Yes. I need Dr. Claire Bennett's contact. The pediatrician." "That's right. Send her number to my cell phone." "Yes, go on, sir." After hanging up, Asher grabbed the car keys, not for the Bentley he usually drove, but for a discreet Ford Escape he kept for occasions when he preferred not to attract attention. He drove to the place where he had found Lily the day before. The rain had let up somewhat, but the sky remained grey, threatening to return at any moment. He parked on the opposite side of the street and waited. An hour passed. Then 2. People hurried by, some protected by umbrellas, others with only hoods or hats. None of them were Lily. Asher began to question his plan. What if she did not come back? What if she had found another place to sell candy? Or worse, what if something had happened to her or her sister overnight? He was about to start the car and look for her in other streets when he finally saw her. Lily came walking down the sidewalk, still wearing the same worn school uniform. She carried the same candy box, and her face bore the same serious expression. She positioned herself exactly where she had stood the previous day and remained there, ignoring the curious or disapproving looks of passers-by. Asher felt a pang in his chest. He had hoped, unconsciously, that the money he'd given her might have made some difference, that perhaps she would not have to stand there today selling candy. But there she was, as though nothing had changed. He thought about approaching her, about speaking to her directly, but something stopped him. Not yet. He needed to understand her situation better before intervening again. He decided to wait and watch. Lily stayed at her spot, occasionally approaching people who passed by, timidly offering her candy. Most ignored her. A few shook their heads, and a handful stopped to buy. As hours passed, Asher noticed small details about her. How she remained upright, even when she appeared tired. How her eyes were always alert, observing everything around her. How she meticulously counted the money after each sale, putting it away in a small inner pocket of her worn backpack. Around noon, an elderly woman approached Lily. They spoke briefly. The lady bought a pack of candy and, before leaving, gently touched Lily's shoulder. It was the first time Asher saw a flicker of emotion on Lily's face, something akin to a smile, though shy and reserved. During the next hour, foot traffic dwindled. Few people passed by, and even fewer stopped. Lily checked the public clock in the square several times, as though she had an appointment. At 2 in the afternoon, she put away the remaining candy in her backpack and began to walk. Asher waited until she was a short distance ahead, then got out of the car. He followed her from a safe distance, careful not to be noticed. Lily walked with a determined stride, as if she knew the path well. She crossed the square, past a school. Asher noticed how she kept her gaze fixed straight ahead, avoiding looking at the children playing in the yard, and continued for a few more blocks. After about 10 minutes, she went into a small neighborhood pharmacy, the kind with an old sign and dusty windows. Asher waited outside, watching through the window. He saw Lily approach the counter and talk to the pharmacist, a middle-aged man who looked tired. She opened her backpack and took out a small handful of coins and some crumpled bills, placing them on the counter. The man counted them patiently, then nodded and disappeared into the back of the store. When he returned, he handed Lily a small bottle of medicine. She took it carefully, almost reverently, and stowed it in her backpack. Before she left, the pharmacist said something that made Lily nod seriously. Asher could only decipher part of their conversation by reading their lips, something about take it regularly and see a doctor. When Lily emerged from the pharmacy, she kept walking. They were now moving away from the commercial center, entering streets that were progressively less busy, less maintained. Old buildings with peeling facades, broken sidewalks, trash piled in corners, the kind of neighborhood that never makes it into tourist brochures. Asher kept his distance but stayed alert. This was not a safe area, especially for a girl on her own. He watched as she walked with her head down, avoiding eye contact with everyone who passed, especially groups of teenagers or adult men. After about 20 more minutes, Lily turned onto a narrow street, almost an alley, where the houses were small and crammed close together, many with broken windows or patched with cardboard. She stopped in front of one, a single-story house of exposed brick, with a roof that looked like it might collapse and a cracked wooden door. Lily glanced around, as if checking to see if she was being followed, then went inside. Asher stayed at the corner watching the house. He was far from everything he knew, in a completely different world from his own. A world in which children sold candy to buy medicine and lived in houses that barely deserved to be called such. The reality of that place hit him like a punch to the stomach. For years he had lived in his comfortable apartment, dined in expensive restaurants, traveled the world in private jets. While just a few miles away, there were children like Lily and her sister, struggling daily to survive. It began to rain again, lightly at first, then harder. Asher stayed where he was, feeling the drops soak his jacket, thinking about what to do next. Approaching now might scare Lily. She might think he was a threat, maybe a social worker who would separate her from her sister, or something worse. On the other hand, he could not simply walk away and pretend he had never seen her. The decision was taken out of his hands when the house's door opened again and Lily came out, this time without her backpack. She looked around nervously, then ran down the street in the opposite direction from him. Asher hesitated. Follow her, or... He chose the latter. Something pulled him toward that house, toward the sister Lily had mentioned, the child the medicine was for. He waited until Lily disappeared around the corner, then walked toward the house. He stopped in front of the door, suddenly uncertain. He was about to invade the privacy of a child he barely knew, but worry about what he might find inside prevailed. He took a deep breath and knocked 3 times, softly. Nothing happened. He knocked again, a bit harder. He heard a faint sound inside the house, a cough maybe. "Lily," he called out, keeping his voice low. More silence, followed by soft, hesitant footsteps. The door opened just a crack, and Asher found himself staring into a pair of huge blue eyes in a small, pale face. A girl much younger than Lily, maybe 6 or 7. Her fine blonde hair framed a face that might have been angelic, were it not for its sickly pallor and deep circles under her eyes. "Who are you?" the girl asked weakly. "Where's Lily?" Asher knelt down to her level, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. "My name is Asher. I'm a friend of Lily's," he said, knowing that wasn't entirely true, but unable to find better words. She stepped out for a moment. "You must be her sister." The girl nodded, still cautious. "I'm Elise," she answered, then was interrupted by a coughing fit that made her small body tremble. It was a deep, dry cough, the kind that hurts your chest. Asher felt a stab of concern. This was not just a common cold. "May I come in, Elise? It's raining out here." She hesitated, glancing past him as though expecting to see Lily coming back. "Lily said not to let anyone in," she mumbled, more to herself than to him. "Your sister is right," Asher smiled gently. "We should never let strangers in. But I'm worried about you. You seem really sick." Elise coughed again, this time leaning on the door to keep her balance. Her small face contorted with pain. "I'll wait for Lily out here, then," Asher said, realizing she was indeed following her sister's instructions. "Everything will be okay." Just then, he heard rapid footsteps behind him. He turned to see Lily running toward them, carrying a plastic bag. Her face was contorted with sheer terror. "Get away from her!" Lily shouted, dropping the bag on the ground and running even faster. Asher stood up, lifting his hands in surrender. "Lily, calm down. I only—" He couldn't finish. Lily placed herself between him and the door, shielding her sister with her body like a cornered animal protecting its young. "What do you want?" she demanded, breathless. "Why are you following me?" Her eyes were wide with fear, but also with a fierce determination. Asher noticed how she kept her fists clenched, ready to fight if needed. "I just wanted to help," Asher said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I saw you buying medicine and I thought—" "Thought what?" Lily interrupted, her voice shaking with anger and fear. "That you could just walk into my house, talk to my sister." Asher realized he had made a terrible mistake. In his eagerness to help, he had invaded the little world Lily struggled to protect. "You're right," he said, taking a step back. "I shouldn't have come like this, I'm sorry." Rain now fell heavily on them both, soaking their clothes. Elise remained in the doorway, watching with fearful eyes. "Lily," she called out weakly, "I'm cold." Lily's face changed instantly. Fear gave way to concern. She turned to her sister. "I'm coming in now. Ellie, please go back to bed." Elise nodded and disappeared back inside the house. Lily turned back to Asher, now looking exhausted. "Please, just go away," she said quietly. "We're fine." But Elise's frail body and the cough Asher had heard told him they were anything but fine. "Lily, listen," Asher said, keeping his distance. "I know you don't trust me, and you have every reason not to, but I really want to help you and your sister." "Why?" she asked suspiciously. "What do you get out of it?" It was a good question. What was he gaining? Why was he standing in the rain outside a miserable house, trying to convince a distrusting child to accept his help? "Because I care," he simply replied. "Because nobody should go through what you're going through." Something in Lily's gaze shifted, a spark of recognition, perhaps, but her stance remained defensive. "We don't need charity," she said, though her voice had lost some of its hardness. "It's not charity," Asher replied. "It's humanity." Lily looked at the bag she had dropped on the ground. Asher followed her gaze and saw it contained bread and what looked like a small bottle of milk. "Go home," Lily said finally. "We're okay." Really. But her trembling body and the cough Asher had heard from Elise said otherwise. "Could I at least bring you something to eat? Something better than bread and milk, maybe some dry clothes?" "Your sister seems really sick, Lily." The mention of Elise's health seemed to pierce Lily like an arrow. Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment she looked only what she truly was, a child overburdened with too many responsibilities. "You're not going to call social services?" she asked, almost whispering. "Not if you don't want me to," Asher promised, understanding her fear. "I just want to help." There was a long pause, during which Lily appeared to wage an internal battle. Finally, she nodded so slightly that Asher almost didn't notice. "All right," she said, picking up the bag from the ground. "You can bring food, but don't come inside the house yet." "Please." "Deal," Asher agreed immediately. "I'll be back in an hour, tops." Lily nodded again, then quickly went back inside, shutting the door behind her. Asher stood there for a moment, feeling the rain lessen to a drizzle. Then he turned and hurried back to his car. On the way, he called Dr. Bennett, a reputable pediatrician who had treated the son of a close friend. He explained the situation vaguely, mentioning only that he knew a sick child who needed discreet medical attention. "This seems irregular, Mr. Reynolds," said the doctor cautiously. "I know, doctor, and I wouldn't ask if it weren't important. I promise it's nothing illegal. It's just a delicate situation." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "All right," she agreed at last, "but only because I know your reputation. I'm free tomorrow morning." "Thank you, doctor. I'll send you the address." After hanging up, Asher stopped by a shopping center. He bought more than he had initially intended. Enough food for several days, including fruits, vegetables, meats, dairy, bread, cereals, and yes, chocolate. New clothes for both girls, pants, shirts, jackets, socks, underwear, blankets, pillows, personal hygiene products, some books and notebooks, and even some simple toys for Elise. He had to make 2 trips from the car to Lily's house, carrying heavy bags. On the first trip, Lily hesitated before opening the door. On the second trip, she opened it more quickly, though she still kept her distance. "You're sure you won't call anyone?" she asked, while Asher set the last bags down on the doorstep. "I promise," he replied. "But Lily, your sister seems to need real medical attention. Those medicines you bought, are they enough?" Lily lowered her gaze, biting her lip. "I don't know," she admitted so quietly that Asher almost didn't hear. "The pharmacist said she should see a doctor, but we can't afford it. If we go to a public hospital, they'll ask questions, and then—" She trailed off. But Asher understood. If they went to the hospital, the authorities would be notified about 2 minors on their own. They might be separated, placed in different homes. I can bring a doctor to you, Asher offered, someone I trust who won't ask questions. She can examine Elise and recommend proper treatment. Lily raised her eyes, a glimmer of hope showing in her tired look. Would you do that? Of course, Asher replied, feeling a wave of relief that he could finally help in a concrete way. Tomorrow, in fact. Lily nodded, and then hesitantly opened the door a bit more. You want to come in? Just for a bit. To meet Elise. It was a huge gesture of trust, and Asher understood its significance. He nodded and carefully entered, trying not to make any sudden or intrusive movements. The interior of the house was as bleak as the exterior suggested, one single room with a rough concrete floor and walls marked by damp stains. There was hardly any furniture besides an old mattress in the corner where Elise lay, covered by what appeared to be a thin, worn blanket. A small table and 2 chairs completed the furnishings, along with some cardboard boxes that seemed to serve as improvised cabinets. A gas burner stood in the corner next to some battered pans. The ceiling had dark patches of damp, and Asher noticed a strategically placed bucket in a corner, presumably to catch rainwater from a leak. Asher kept his face neutral, hiding his shock. Seeing children living in such conditions, while he had so much. Ellie, this is Asher, Lily said, approaching her sister. He brought some things for us. Elise sat up with difficulty, and Asher could see just how frail she was. Her thin arms, her hollowed cheeks, her skin tinted a yellowish hue, suggesting some kind of hepatic or nutritional issue. Hi, Elise, he greeted, keeping a distance from the mattress. It's nice to meet you officially. The girl offered a small smile, showing baby teeth. You brought all those bags, she asked, curious. Yes, there's food, clothes, and other things I thought you might need, Asher replied, smiling back. Is there chocolate? Elise asked, a sparkle in her eyes that had not been there before. Asher laughed, feeling a pang in his heart. Even sick, she was still just a child. Yes, there is chocolate, he confirmed, but I think you should eat something more substantial first. Right, Lily? Lily, who was opening bags and organizing their contents, nodded. I'll prepare something for us, she said, sounding slightly lighter. Do you want to stay for dinner? Asher sensed it was another gesture of trust. I'd love to, he replied. Can I help? In the next few minutes, he and Lily prepared a simple meal with the items Asher had brought. The presence of fresh, abundant food seemed to transform the environment. Elise perked up, sitting at the table with them, though she still coughed occasionally. This is really good, said the girl, munching on an apple after the main meal. Better than the school's food. You go to school, Elise? Asher asked, trying to keep the conversation light. Elise glanced at Lily, as if seeking permission to answer. We used to, Lily answered for her, but then Ellie got sick and it got complicated. Asher nodded without pressing. He noticed how Lily always used we, as if she and her sister shared all experiences. It was the protective instinct of someone who had taken responsibility for another person. During dinner, Asher tried starting light conversations, avoiding intrusive questions. He talked about the city, about children's books, about animals and nature. Safe topics. Elise babbled happily, excited by the presence of someone new. She spoke about cartoons she watched when the neighbor's TV was on and she could peek through the window. She mentioned a cat that sometimes visited the backyard and that she would like to adopt. Lily, on the other hand, remained more reserved, watching the interaction between the two with alert eyes. Occasionally, she smiled at some funny remark her sister made, but then returned to a watchful posture. After the meal, while Elise returned to the mattress with a new book Asher had brought, Lily invited him to sit at the small table. Thank you, she said, looking at the leftover food. This will last us several days. You're welcome, Asher replied. And I'll come back tomorrow with more supplies and with the doctor, if that's okay with you. Lily nodded, but there was a question in her eyes. What is it? Asher asked. Why are you doing this? Really? The question came out loaded with suspicion that seemed deeply ingrained in her. Because I can help, Asher answered simply. And because you deserve a better chance. Lily studied him for a moment, as if trying to gauge his sincerity. We're on our own, she finally said, her voice nearly a whisper. Since something bad happened. It was the first time she had mentioned her family situation. Asher waited quietly, avoiding pressure. Don't you have any relatives who could help? He asked gently. Lily shook her head. Our grandmother died before I was born, and our father... She hesitated, choosing her words. He was never around. Asher noticed how she avoided mentioning her mother, even when the conversation naturally hinted at it. There was a pain there that she was not ready to share. It's just the two of us now, Lily concluded, looking at Elise, who was engrossed in the book, unaware of their conversation. But it's fine. I take care of her. You're very brave, Lily, Asher said sincerely, but nobody should bear so much burden alone, especially someone your age. For a moment, Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. We'll be fine, she said, with a firmness that seemed aimed more at herself than at him. Now that Elise will have a doctor, we'll be okay. Asher nodded without contradicting her. Trust, for someone who had lost so much, was built gradually, step by step. Today, they had only taken the first step. May I ask how long you've been? He gestured vaguely at the house and the situation. 3 months, Lily answered after a short hesitation. We used to live somewhere better, but after everything happened, we couldn't afford the rent anymore. Then we found this place. And school? I went every day until last month. Lily looked at her hands. But then Ellie got sick, and I couldn't leave her alone. And we needed money for the medicine, so... I understand, Asher said, perceiving the enormity of her responsibility. He glanced at Elise, who had now fallen asleep, the book still open on her chest. Even asleep, her breathing was labored with soft, wheezing sounds. She really needs that doctor, Asher said, concerned. I know, Lily replied, her voice tired. I'm afraid it might be pneumonia or something worse. Tomorrow, Dr. Bennett will be here, Asher promised. She's one of the best pediatricians in the city. Lily nodded, grateful, then stood up to walk Asher to the door. Thank you, she repeated, looking at all the supplies left. For all this? You're welcome, Asher responded. I'll come back tomorrow with the doctor, if that's still okay. Yes, please do. Asher took a simple prepaid phone from his pocket. I got this for you, he said, handing it to her. It already has my number saved. If you need anything during the night, call me. Lily took the phone in surprise, as if it were an alien device. I've never had a phone before, she muttered. It's easy to use, Asher explained. It's charged. You just press this button to turn it on and that button to turn it off. Lily turned the device in her hands, familiarizing herself with it. Thank you, Asher, she said, with what seemed like a faint smile. Really? See you tomorrow then, he said in farewell. See you tomorrow. As he walked back to his car under a sky that was finally clearing, Asher felt a swirl of emotions, sadness at the girl's situation, anger at a system that allowed children to live like this, but also a spark of hope. He looked back one last time before getting into the car. The small Tosu exposed brick house seemed even more fragile in the twilight glow. But now, at least, he knew that inside there was food, clean blankets, and 2 girls who might, just might, begin to believe that not everyone in the world had abandoned them. On the way home, Asher confirmed the next morning's appointment with Dr. Bennett. He had made a decision without even realizing it. He wouldn't just provide Lily and Elise with food and medicine. He would find a way to truly... Mercy General Hospital occupied an entire city block in the downtown area. From the outside, its modern glass and steel facade reflected the sunlight during the day and glowed like a beacon at night. For most people, the building represented hope, a place where science and compassion came together to heal. For Lily, it was a prison of white walls and strange smells, a place that threatened everything she had fought to preserve. It had been 3 days since the emergency, 3 days since Elise, face burning with fever and lips turning blue from lack of oxygen, had been rushed to the hospital. The diagnosis was quickly confirmed: acute pneumonia, complicated by malnutrition and anemia. Without hospital treatment, her chances of survival would have been minimal. Asher had used all his influence to secure the best room, the best medical team, the best treatment possible. He also managed, through discreet conversations and some strategic phone calls, to postpone the inevitable questions about the girl's legal guardianship. It was only a temporary solution, he knew, but enough for the critical moment. Elise responded well to the antibiotics. The doctors were optimistic, saying her recovery, though slow, seemed promising. Color was gradually returning to her cheeks, and her periods of sleep were growing more peaceful, less interrupted by violent coughing fits. It was Lily who was not improving. The girl had not left the hospital since her sister's admission. She refused to leave the room, even for a few minutes. She ate little, just enough to stay awake, and slept even less, dozing fitfully in a chair next to Elise's bed. And she barely spoke. On the third day, as the sun set, casting a golden glow through the curtains of the hospital room, Asher decided to intervene. "Lily," he called softly, approaching the chair where she sat watching Elise sleep. "You need to eat something decent." She did not take her eyes off her sister. "I'm fine," she replied quietly. "You're not, and you know it." Asher pulled up a chair, sitting in front of her. "You haven't eaten properly today or yesterday." "I'm not hungry." "Lily, look at me." Reluctantly, she complied. Asher suppressed a sigh of concern. The dark circles under her eyes contrasted with her pale skin. Her hair, usually kept neat despite her circumstances, was disheveled. She looked like she had aged years in just a few days. "The hospital cafeteria has surprisingly good food," he said in a casual tone. "And I really hate eating alone. Will you join me? Just for half an hour. Elise is sleeping soundly." Lily glanced at her sister again, biting her lower lip. The gesture Asher had come to recognize as her sign of anxiety. "What if she wakes up and doesn't find me here? Nurse Julie is on duty. She promised to call us immediately if Elise wakes. We're just one floor down." Lily shook her head. "I can't," she murmured. "I promised her I would never leave her alone." Asher realized it was not just stubbornness or fatigue. There was something deeper in Lily's fear, something he did not fully understand yet. "Okay," he relented. "I'll bring you something here, then. You don't have to go to that trouble." "It's no trouble." Asher left the room, more worried than he cared to admit. Elise's medical situation, though serious, was at least under control. But what about Lily? How could he help someone who refused any help, determined to shoulder an invisible, crushing weight on her own? Down in the cafeteria, while waiting in line, he called David, his lawyer. "Any updates on the legal situation?" he asked abruptly. "I'm working on it," David replied. "But it's not simple, Asher. We have 2 underage girls with no parents or legal guardians. Normally, they'd go straight into the foster system. That's not an option." "I know. I'm looking into alternatives. Maybe a temporary guardianship while we look for extended family, if there is any. And if there isn't, a silence on the other end. There's always adoption," David suggested cautiously, "but it's a lengthy process. And you'd have to seriously consider if you're prepared for—" "I'll do whatever is necessary," Asher interrupted, surprising even himself with the firmness of his statement. "Just tell me what to do." After hanging up, Asher ordered sandwiches, fruit, and natural juices. As he waited, he thought back to what had led him here. Just a few weeks earlier, his life had been completely different, filled with business, meetings, and million-dollar decisions, and now here he was, in a hospital cafeteria, worried about the well-being of 2 children he barely knew. Funny how life can change entirely in an instant. That moment in the rain when he first saw Lily. When he returned to the room, he found Lily in the same position. The only difference was that she now held Elise's hand, who was still sleeping. "I brought you some choices," Asher said, placing the tray on the little table beside the chair. "I didn't know what you like." Lily looked at the food, then up at him with an expression of surprise and something like gratitude. "Thank you," she muttered, "but you didn't have to bring so much." "Better too much than too little," he replied with a small smile. "Besides, when Elise wakes up, she might want something other than hospital food." Mentioning Elise, seemed to ease some of Lily's tension. She picked up a sandwich and took a small bite, chewing slowly. Asher sat down again, taking a coffee for himself. They stayed silent for a few minutes, the only sounds in the room being the rhythmic beeping of the monitors and Elise's soft breathing. "Why are you doing all this?" Lily asked suddenly, without looking at him. Asher paused for a moment before replying, "Because I can," he said simply. "And because no one should go through what you two are going through." Lily continued eating in silence, but Asher sensed that something had shifted in the atmosphere between them, as though a small barrier had been lowered. Time passed slowly. Elise woke briefly, took her medication, and drifted back to sleep. Asher convinced Lily to at least take a shower in the bathroom attached to the room, promising not to leave Elise's side for even a second. When she returned, looking a bit more refreshed, he suggested she sleep in the other bed in the room, which was vacant. "I'll stay awake," he promised. "If anything happens, anything at all, I'll wake you immediately." Lily hesitated, eyeing her sister for a long moment. Just for a few hours, she finally relented, and Asher recognized how significant that was. But even lying down, Lily could not relax. She tossed and turned, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, then on her sister, then on the digital clock on the wall. "I can't sleep," she admitted after half an hour. "Not with these lights and noises." Asher nodded sympathetically. Hospitals were unsettling places even for adults. For a child, they must be even more strange and frightening. "Want me to read something to you?" he offered, recalling the books he'd brought during his earlier purchases. "It might distract your mind." Lily shook her head. "Then just try to rest. Close your eyes even if you don't sleep." She complied, but Asher could see by the tension in her body that she was far from relaxed. Night wore on. Nurses came and went quietly, checking Elise's vital signs. Outside, the city pulsed beneath a starless sky, its urban lights obscuring the vastness of the universe. Around 2 in the morning, when the hospital had settled into a sort of relative silence, Lily spoke again, her voice almost a whisper in the darkened room. "I'm scared." Asher, who had been thumbing through a magazine without really reading it, looked up. "Of what?" he asked in the same soft tone. Lily sat up in bed, hugging her knees. "Everything," she answered, her voice cracking slightly. "That Elise won't get better, that someone will find out we're alone and separate us, that I won't be strong enough to care for her." It was the first time he had seen her so vulnerable. Asher felt a lump rise in his throat, a mixture of compassion and admiration for this girl carrying such a heavy load. "Lily," he said, choosing his words carefully, "you don't have to be strong all the time, and you certainly don't have to do this alone." "I do," she insisted, with a conviction that seemed to come from a deep place of pain. "I promised my mother I would take care of Ellie. It's my responsibility." It was the first time she had mentioned her mother directly. Asher stayed quiet, afraid any question might make her shut down again. "I saw what happens when you fail," Lily continued, now staring at her own hands. "I saw what happens when you aren't strong enough." "What do you mean?" There was a long silence, long enough that Asher thought she would not answer. But then, speaking so softly that he had to lean in to hear, Lily began, "My mother was beautiful," she said, as if describing a distant figure, almost mythical, and smart. "Everyone said she could be anything, a doctor, a lawyer, a scientist, but then she got pregnant with me while she was still in college." Lily paused, taking a deep breath. "My father didn't want to know. He left before I was born. But my mother, she was strong. She finished college, got a good job, took care of me by herself, and everything was fine, you know. We had a nice apartment. I went to a decent school. She took me to the park on weekends." Her face softened with the memory, a brief moment of light in the darkness. Then she met Brian. At first, he seemed nice. He brought presents, took us out to dinner, said he wanted a family with us. They got married when I was 8. Lily's expression hardened. Early the next year, Ellie was born, and that's when everything started to change. Brian lost his job. He started drinking, blaming my mother for everything. He said we were a burden, that he never wanted a family, that she tricked him. Lily swallowed hard, and Asher felt silent anger rising toward these men who had abandoned Lily, her mother, and her sister. He left when Ellie was 2, disappeared just like my father. But before that, he destroyed everything, spent all my mother's savings, sold our things, left bills unpaid, even hit her a few times. Asher felt a knot tighten in his chest, quiet rage building. My mother tried to start over, Lily went on. She went back to work in 2 jobs, but there were so many debts. We lost the apartment, had to move somewhere smaller, in a worse neighborhood. She got more and more tired, more sad. Sometimes I'd hear her crying at night when she thought we were asleep. Lily glanced at Elise, who was still sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the painful story. This past winter, my mother got sick. We thought it was just a cold. She kept working, she couldn't afford not to, but it got worse. Coughing, fever, trouble breathing. Asher felt a chill run down his spine, realizing where this was going. When we finally convinced her to go to the hospital, it was too late. Severe pneumonia, the doctors said, made worse by exhaustion and a weakened immune system. She died 3 days later. Lily's voice cracked on the last word, and silent tears began rolling down her cheeks. My mother lost everything. And then she lost her life, she murmured, the words broken by emotion. And now Ellie has the same symptoms. The same cough, the same fever. I can't lose her too. The cry she had held back for so long finally emerged, not in dramatic sobs, but in quiet, deep weeping, as if she feared the sound of her pain itself might disturb her sister's fragile rest. Asher felt his own heart ache at this revelation. It all made sense now. Lily's constant fear, her refusal to leave her sister's side, her determination to handle everything alone. It wasn't just responsibility, it was terror. Terror of reliving the most devastating loss of her life. Without a second thought, he got up and sat beside her on the bed. He hesitated for a moment, then gently put his arm around Lily's shoulders. To his surprise, rather than pulling away, she leaned into him, as though finally allowing someone to share the weight she had carried alone for so long. Elise will be okay, Asher said, with a conviction that came from deep within. She has the best doctors, she has you, and now she has me too. You can't promise that, Lily murmured through her tears. No one can. You're right. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen, but I can promise you won't be alone, no matter what. Lily looked at him, her eyes red and swollen, yet with a spark of something that could be hope. Why? She asked again, the same question she had voiced so many times. Why do you care so much about us? Asher pondered for a moment. Why indeed? What was it about these 2 sisters that stirred him so deeply? Because sometimes, he replied softly, people come into our lives for a reason, and when that happens, we have a choice, to ignore it or to act. I choose to act. It wasn't a complete answer, and both of them knew it, but for now, it was enough. They fell silent, side by side on the small hospital bed, each lost in their own thoughts. Across the room, Elise stirred slightly in her sleep, murmuring unintelligible words before settling down again. You should try to sleep now, Asher finally said. Tomorrow is another day. Lily nodded and lay down again. This time, her body seemed less tense, as if sharing her story had lifted some of the weight from her shoulders. Asher, she called when he was about to go back to his chair. Yes. Thank you for not saying everything will be all right. Everyone says that, and it's never true. Asher gave a sad smile. All I can say is we'll face whatever comes. Together? That night, Lily finally slept. Maybe not deeply or fully, but at least for a few real hours. Asher remained awake, watching over the 2 sisters, thinking about the story he had just heard and what he could do to help them. He realized that, deep down, what Lily needed most wasn't practical solutions or empty promises. She needed presence. Someone willing to sit beside her in the darkness, sharing her silence, her pain, her hope. Night after night, as Elise slowly recovered, Asher repeated the same ritual. Sometimes they talked about trivial things, books, movies, places they wanted to see. Sometimes they sat in companionable silence. And on the hardest nights, when Lily's fear returned to haunt her, he simply held her hand, reminding her in that simple gesture, "You are not alone." It wasn't a magic cure. The fear was still there, the pain was still there. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, something began to shift. A barrier had been broken, a truth shared, a burden, if not removed, at least shared. And in that, both Lily and Asher found something unexpected. The beginning of healing. Time inside a hospital follows its own rhythm, hours that feel like days, days that blend into a continuous haze of fluorescent lights, antiseptic smells, and the constant comings and goings of white-coated professionals. For Lily and Asher, each minute at Elise's bedside was a battle between hope and fear. In the first 5 days after she was admitted, the girl's condition remained stable, but showed no significant signs of improvement. The medical team kept neutral expressions, speaking in technical terms about response to antibiotics, oxygen saturation, and lung function. Lily had learned to decipher those expressions, to notice even the slightest furrow of a brow, to interpret tiny pauses in their sentences. She had become skilled at reading between the lines of what the doctors didn't say outright, and what she read did not always reassure her. Asher, too, had established a routine. Every morning he arrived early with clean clothes for Lily and a breakfast better than the hospital's offerings. During the day, he alternated between working remotely on his laptop and participating in discussions with the doctors, asking questions Lily might not know how to ask. At night, he sat with her, offering silent support as they watched Elise sleep, hooked up to tubes and monitors. On the 5th night, when the hospital had settled into that semi-silence characteristic of the early hours, something changed. Elise, who normally slept a restless, feverish sleep, began coughing violently. The monitors began blaring alarms, and within seconds the room filled with doctors and nurses. "We need more oxygen. Her saturation is dropping fast. Elise, look at me, sweetheart. Can you hear me?" Lily was gently but firmly pushed away from the bed as the medical team went to work. Asher held her by the shoulders, both of them watching in horror. "What's happening?" Lily whispered, her voice breaking. "Why isn't she getting better?" "They're doing the best they can," Asher answered, though he felt the same dread rising within him. After what felt like an eternity, the crisis was contained. Dr. Bennett, the pediatrician Asher had hired, approached them with a grave expression. "There was a buildup of fluid in her right lung," she explained. "We need to drain it and adjust her antibiotic treatment. The next 24 hours will be critical." "Is she going to—" Lily could not finish the question. The words stuck in her throat. "We'll do everything we can," replied the doctor, placing a hand on Lily's shoulder. "Elise is a fighter." That night was the longest since Elise's admission. Lily refused to leave the room for even a minute, keeping her eyes on her sister and the monitors, as if her constant vigilance might ward off anything else bad from happening. Asher stayed by her side, silent most of the time, occasionally handing her a cup of water or giving her a gentle pat on the shoulder. Words seemed inadequate, insufficient against the magnitude of that moment. By sunrise on the 7th day, as soft morning light began to filter through the blinds, Dr. Bennett returned. She examined Elise thoroughly, reviewed the latest test results, and spoke briefly with the night nurse. "The drainage went well," she said finally, turning to Lily and Asher. "And the new antibiotics seem to be working. Her numbers are starting to improve." "That means," Lily began, afraid to get her hopes up only to see them dashed. "It means we're on the right path," the doctor replied, allowing a small smile. "We're not out of the woods yet, but it's a good sign." The following hours brought more positive signs. Elise's fever began to subside. Her breathing, though still aided by oxygen, grew less labored. The numbers on the monitors improved little by little. That afternoon, while Lily was sitting at the bedside, holding her sister's small hand, Elise opened her eyes, not with the feverish confusion of days prior, but with clarity. "Lily!" she called, her voice weak but distinct. The emotion that rushed through Lily felt almost physical, a wave that started in her chest and spread to the tips of her fingers. It was the first time in days that Elise recognized her immediately, free from fever-induced disorientation. "I'm right here, Ellie," she said, leaning closer. "I'm right here." Elise looked around, as though taking in her surroundings for the first time. Her eyes, still tired but more alert, settled on the tubes attached to her arm. "These hurt," she said, wrinkling her nose. Lily felt a spontaneous laugh escape her throat. It was so typical of Elise. Even when sick, she found the energy to complain. "I know, but they're helping you get better." Asher, who had been on the other side of the room talking on the phone, noticed that Elise was awake and approached quickly. "Hello, Sleeping Beauty," he said with a warm smile. "We've missed you." Elise looked at him for a moment, as if trying to recall. "Asher," she finally said, "you're still here." "Of course I am. I promised I wouldn't go anywhere. Remember?" Elise nodded slowly, then turned back to her sister. "I'm hungry," she declared, as though that were the biggest problem in the world. Lily and Asher exchanged surprised, then relieved smiles. Hunger was a good sign, an excellent one, in fact. "I'll call the nurse to see what you can eat," Asher said, pressing the call button. A nurse arrived, checked Elise's vital signs, and after a quick conversation with the doctor on call, brought a small bowl of chicken broth and some gelatin. Elise ate slowly, with Lily helping hold the spoon. Each successful bite brought Lily increasing relief. It was like watching a flower bloom that had nearly withered. When she finished her meal, Elise leaned back against the pillows, clearly tired from the effort but with a different expression on her face. Less pain, less struggle. "I have a surprise for you," Asher said, taking a small teddy bear from his pocket. "I thought he could keep you company while you get better." Elise's eyes lit up at the sight of the toy. She took it carefully, as though it were a fragile treasure. "Thank you," she murmured, hugging the bear against her chest. Within seconds, her eyelids grew heavy, weariness overcoming her excitement. "Rest now, Ellie," Lily whispered, tucking the blankets around her sister. "I'll be here when you wake up." When Elise fell asleep again, this time more peacefully, Lily allowed herself to relax for the first time in days. She sank back into the chair by the bed, exhausted but relieved. That was when Asher noticed something different, something that had disappeared when they first entered the hospital, but was now returning, tentatively, like a hesitant visitor. A smile, not a courtesy smile, or a forced one, meant to reassure her sister. A genuine smile that began at the corners of her mouth and gradually spread, lighting her entire face like a ray of sunshine, finally breaking through heavy clouds. "She's going to be okay," Lily said, her voice thick with emotion, more a statement than a question. "She's really going to be okay." Asher nodded, feeling a tightness in his own throat. "Yes," he replied simply. "She will." In that hospital room, surrounded by the soft beeping of monitors and the gentle glow of late afternoon, they had witnessed what felt, after so many days of uncertainty and fear, like a small miracle. It wasn't the end of their journey. They still faced many challenges: Elise's full recovery, the girl's legal status, an uncertain future waiting for them. But in that moment, as he watched Lily's smile, rare and precious as a wildflower blooming through concrete, Asher knew that they had overcome the worst, and together, somehow, they would find their way forward. The following days brought a transformation that felt almost miraculous. Elise improved by the hour, regaining not only her physical strength but also that vibrant energy so characteristic of her. Her voice, once weak and broken by coughing, again filled the room with curious questions and spontaneous laughter. The pneumonia was retreating, defeated by a combination of potent medications, top-notch medical care, and perhaps the fierce will of a little girl who had plenty to live for. Test results showed constant improvement in her lung function. Supplemental oxygen was no longer needed during the day. Color had fully returned to her cheeks, and her appetite grew each mealtime. "She's responding exceptionally well to the treatment," Dr. Bennett commented during her morning visit, while listening to Elise's lungs with a stethoscope. "Better than we expected, to be honest." "When can we go home?" Elise asked, impatient like any child confined to a hospital room for too long. The doctor smiled, adjusting her glasses. "At this rate, in 2 or 3 days." The news thrilled Elise, who began listing all the things she planned to do once she left the hospital. Asher, standing by the window, also smiled in relief, but it was Lily's reaction that caught his eye. Instead of the expected joy, a shadow seemed to cross her face. She forced a smile for her sister, of course, and thanked the doctor. But Asher noted how her shoulders tensed, how her hands gripped each other. "Everything okay?" he asked when the doctor left. "Sure," Lily answered quickly, too quickly. "Why wouldn't it be?" Before Asher could press further, a nurse walked in carrying Elise's breakfast, and the conversation was halted. All morning long, Lily seemed physically present but mentally elsewhere. She answered questions with single words, flashed a perfunctory smile when appropriate, but her eyes often wandered beyond the window, as if searching for something far away. Her behavior continued throughout the day. While Elise watched cartoons on the small TV in the room, Lily sat in a corner chair, absently thumbing through a magazine without really reading it. "I'm going to get us something to eat," Asher announced late in the afternoon. "Any special requests?" "Ice cream," Elise exclaimed immediately. "If the nurse allows it, why not?" he said with a smile, then glanced at Lily. "How about you?" "I'm not hungry," she murmured. "You have to eat something." "Maybe later." Asher hesitated, concerned, but decided not to push. Perhaps she was just tired after so many days of constant vigilance. "I'll be right back," he said, leaving the room. He took the elevator down to the hospital cafeteria, thinking about Lily's strange behavior. It was almost as if, as Elise improved, Lily withdrew further, as if the sister's imminent recovery, rather than bringing relief, triggered some kind of anxiety. When he returned about 20 minutes later with a tray of sandwiches, juices, and yes, a small cup of vanilla ice cream for Elise, he found only the younger girl. "Where's Lily?" he asked, placing the tray on the small table. Elise shrugged, her eyes on the ice cream. "She said she needed to walk around a bit. She said she'd be back soon." "How long ago did she leave?" "I don't know. Maybe 10 minutes." Asher felt a slight uneasiness. It wasn't like Lily to leave her sister alone, even for a short time, especially now that Elise was only just starting to recover. "I'm going to look for her. Stay here and eat your ice cream, okay? Not too much," he added with a smile. Elise nodded, already prying the lid off the cup. Asher went out into the hallway, glancing both ways. No sign of Lily. He asked a passing nurse if she had seen a roughly 12-year-old girl, and she pointed toward the stairwell leading to the ground floor. In the hospital lobby, Asher searched among the people coming and going, waiting in chairs, chatting in small groups. Nothing. He checked the women's restroom, asking a staff member to go in and look for Lily. She came out, shaking her head. An unsettling thought crossed his mind. What if Lily wasn't just going for a walk? What if she... He went out the hospital's main doors into the fresh, early evening air. The sun was beginning to set, tinting the sky with orange and pink. He glanced around the parking lot to the sidewalk near the ambulance entrance. Then he noticed, across the street, a small park. Nothing fancy, just a few trees, wooden benches, a paved path, and a modest playground. Could that be where Lily had gone? He hurried across the street into the park. There were few people at that hour, an elderly man feeding pigeons, some children on the swings under their parents' watch, a teenage couple sharing headphones on a distant bench. He walked the paths, feeling his concern grow with each minute. Then, nearing a more wooded area, he saw her. Lily was sitting on the ground, back against a large tree trunk, knees drawn up against her chest, head bowed. She looked small and vulnerable, so unlike the strong, determined girl he had come to know. He approached quietly, not wanting to startle her. "Lily?" he called softly. She lifted her head in surprise. Her face was tear-streaked, eyes red and swollen. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Who's with Ellie?" "She's fine. She's eating ice cream and watching TV," Asher replied, stepping closer. "I'm more worried about you right now." Lily turned her gaze away, fixing it on some distant spot. "You shouldn't have followed me. You left without saying where you were going. Elise is worried. I'm worried. I'm fine. I just needed some air." Asher knelt in front of her, trying to make eye contact, but Lily kept her gaze averted. "Lily, what's going on?" he asked gently. "I thought you'd be happy. Elise is getting better. In a few days, you'll be out of here." His words seemed to strike a nerve. Lily's eyes filled with tears again, and she pressed her lips tightly to stifle a sob. "That's just it," she burst out, surprising Asher with her intensity. "She's getting better, and soon we'll leave here." "And then what, Asher?" Before he could reply, she went on, the words tumbling out in a torrent. "We go back to that miserable house, with no money, no food. Elise will just get sick again in a matter of weeks. Or maybe some well-meaning social worker will separate us. Or maybe," her voice cracked, "maybe you'll get tired of us. People always get tired, eventually." Asher felt something shatter inside at her words. The raw vulnerability in Lily, the genuine fear in her eyes. This wasn't just a passing anxiety. It was her life pattern, an expectation of abandonment forged by repeated loss. "Lily, look at me," he pleaded, his voice both firm and gentle. Reluctantly, she obeyed, meeting his gaze. "I won't abandon you," he said, each word filled with conviction. "No matter what happens, I'll be here, for you and for Elise." Lily shook her head, as though the words could not penetrate the wall of her fear. "You say that now? Everyone says that at first. My dad said he loved my mom. Brian said he wanted a family. But when things got hard, people left. Always. Not always, Lily." "How can you know?" she challenged, her voice thick with tears. "How can you be sure you won't change your mind?" Asher fell silent for a moment, thinking how to explain this certainty he felt, how to make this child, so deeply scarred by abandonment, believe that not everyone leaves. "I was left behind too, Lily," he finally said softly. "My father abandoned us. My mother and I were cold and hungry. I know what fear feels like." Lily's eyes went wide, surprise evident on her face. "I know what it's like to lie awake at night wondering if you'll have food in the morning," Asher continued. "To wear the same uniform for years because there's no money for a new one. To watch someone you love suffer because you can't afford medical care." He paused, feeling his own emotions rise in his throat. "But the difference, Lily, is that now I can do something about it. I can make sure you and Elise never go through what I went through. And I want to do that, not because I pity you, but because—" His voice faltered for a moment, and he inhaled deeply before going on, "Because you saved me too. I didn't realize I needed a family until I met you." Something changed in Lily's expression. The wall of distrust she habitually kept raised seemed to waver, like an old fence finally giving way to time. "Before I met you, I had everything money could buy," Asher continued, "but I was empty inside. I spent my days surrounded by people, yet I felt utterly alone. Then, on that rainy day, I saw a girl selling candy, someone who, despite facing the worst life had to offer, still found the strength to care for her sister, to keep fighting." He reached out, brushing a single tear from Lily's cheek. "You showed me what true courage is, Lily, what love really means. And if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life repaying you for that." A charged silence settled between them, like the air before a storm. Lily stared at Asher, her eyes searching his for any hint of dishonesty or lack of sincerity. She found none. Suddenly, without warning or words, Lily threw her arms around Asher's neck with such force that she nearly knocked him over. Her small arms clung to him, and she buried her face in his shoulder, sobbing openly now. Asher hugged her back, holding her tightly, as though he could shield her from all the fears and pains of the world with that single embrace. They stayed that way for a long time, wordless, communicating only through that hug which seemed to say everything that needed saying. When at last they pulled apart, Lily's cheeks were still wet with tears, but there was something different in her eyes, a peace that hadn't been there before. "We should go back," she said finally. "Ellie will be worried." Asher nodded, getting to his feet and offering a hand to help her up. Lily took it without hesitation, a small gesture that meant more than any declaration could. They walked back to the hospital together, side by side, in a comfortable silence. The world around them was unchanged, the same trees, the same buildings, the same sky now painted with the colors of twilight. But something fundamental had shifted between them. It wasn't a signed contract or a promise spoken in grand words. It was something deeper, more visceral, a shared understanding born of pain and the hope they had found together. It was the start of a family. When they returned to the hospital room, they found Elise asleep, the TV remote still in her hand and a faint smile on her lips. The empty ice cream container sat on the bedside table. "She looked so peaceful," Lily remarked, adjusting the blanket around her sister with a tender gesture. "Like you now?" Asher asked softly. Lily looked up at him, and for the first time since they met, her smile seemed completely free of shadows. "Yes," she replied simply. "Like me now." Outside, the first stars were appearing in the night sky, tiny points of light in the darkness. Inside the hospital room, three people whose paths had crossed by fate shared a comfortable silence, a new beginning. A foundation stronger than any contract, more lasting than any formal promise. The silent love uniting them now, against all odds and beyond all scars, was merely the first chapter of a story still being written. Morning sunlight streamed through the half-open blinds of the hospital room, creating patches of gold on the floor. Elise slept peacefully, her chest rising and falling at a steady, healthy rhythm. Next to her, in the reclining chair that had become her makeshift bed, Lily also dozed, her face finally relaxed after weeks of constant worry. Asher stood in the doorway, a mug of hot coffee in his hand. The last 2 weeks had been an emotional roller coaster, from despair to hope, from fear to relief. But ever since their conversation in the park, something had fundamentally changed in the dynamic among them. They were no longer strangers, united only by circumstance. They were no longer just a benefactor and two needy children. They were something more, something that was still forming but already had deep roots. "Good morning," Lily murmured, opening her eyes slowly and meeting Asher's gaze. "Good morning," he replied, approaching her. "How did you sleep?" "Better," she said, stretching in the chair. Her eyes immediately went to Elise, checking on her as she did each time she woke. "She looks good today. Dr. Bennett came by early. She said we'll likely get discharged tomorrow." A genuine smile lit Lily's face, something that had become increasingly frequent over the past few days. It was no longer the guarded, fearful smile that flitted across her face briefly before vanishing. It was open, confident. "Where will we go?" she asked, the question hanging in the air like a delicate bubble. There was no fear in her voice, Asher noted, just curiosity, trust. "I have an idea about that," he said, sitting on the edge of the empty bed beside her. "But I want to talk it over with both of you first." As if summoned by the mention of her name, Elise stirred on the bed, slowly opening her eyes. For a moment, she seemed disoriented, her gaze wandering around the room until it settled on Lily and then on Asher. "Is it breakfast time?" she asked, her voice still rough with sleep. Lily and Asher both laughed at the typical comforting question. "Almost," Asher replied. "How are you feeling, Ellie?" She sat up in bed, propping the pillows behind her with surprising skill for someone who had spent so long in a hospital. "Good," she said simply. "Can I go home today?" "Probably tomorrow," Lily answered, moving closer to help with her sister's pillows. "If you keep getting better like this?" "And which home, Asher?" Elise asked, going straight to the point with the frankness only a child could muster. Asher and Lily exchanged a glance. It was time. "That's actually what I wanted to talk about," he began, carefully choosing his words. "I have a big home with plenty of empty rooms. I was thinking, maybe you two could stay with me for a while, until we figure out what's next." A short silence followed, the words hanging in the air like soap bubbles, fragile and glistening. "You mean, live with you?" Lily asked in a low voice, as though saying it too loudly might make the offer vanish. "Yes," Asher confirmed. "Temporarily, of course, until we find a more permanent solution." He did not mention the long conversations he'd had with David over the past few days, discussing legal options, guardianship possibilities, even adoption. There would be time for those details later. "Is your house nice?" Elise asked, eyes glowing with childlike excitement. "It is," Asher said with a smile. "There's a big yard, and it's near a park. And there's more than enough space for both of you. Elise looked at Lily, as if asking permission to be excited. What do you think, Lily? Asher asked, knowing that ultimately the decision rested on the older sister's shoulders, as always. Lily was silent for a moment, meeting Asher's eyes. Gone was the constant distrust and the fear of abandonment she'd shown him in the park. She was still cautious. She would always be cautious. It was part of who she was, but there was also something new. Hope. I think that would be good, she finally said, giving a shy smile. For Ellie to have a safe place to fully recover. And for you too, Lily, Asher added gently. For both of you, she nodded, finally accepting that she too deserved care, that she could lower her guard just a bit. So it's decided, asked Elise, looking from one to the other expectantly. It's decided, Asher replied, feeling a surge of joy he had not experienced in a long time. As soon as Dr. Bennett discharges you, we'll go home. Our home, at least for now. The word our hung in the air, laden with significance. It wasn't just a casual expression, it was a promise, a commitment, the first building block of something that was forming between them. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Asher made phone calls, arranging Elise's official discharge from the hospital, making sure all the paperwork was in order. He spoke at length with David about the next legal steps, about how to secure a temporary custody arrangement so the sisters could not be separated. Meanwhile, Lily and Elise were more excited than Asher had ever seen them. Elise chatted non-stop about how her new room would look, if she could have a bookshelf, if there were places to explore beyond the park. Lily, more reserved but no less hopeful, asked practical questions about school, routine, and what was expected of them. By late afternoon, when the attending doctor came for a final check on Elise, confirming that she would indeed be discharged the next morning, the hospital room had an almost festive air. I'll pick up some new clothes for you, Asher said, thinking about the few possessions the sisters still had at their old place. Something special for the day of discharge. We don't need new clothes, Lily protested, still uncomfortable with the idea of receiving gifts. I know, Asher responded kindly, but I want to consider it a welcome home present. When he returned a few hours later with bags from department stores, he found the two sisters sitting on Elise's bed, flipping through a magazine together. There was something so normal, so familiar in the scene, that it made his heart ache. Look what I found, he said, placing the bags on the table. I thought you might want something special for tomorrow. To his surprise, it was Lily who got up first, approaching the bags with genuine curiosity. She pulled out a light blue blouse, simple but of good quality, and held it against herself as if checking the fit. It's beautiful, she said softly. Thank you, Asher. There's more, he encouraged, pointing to the other bags. The next few hours were spent amid laughter and trying on new clothes, with Elise insisting on modeling each piece immediately, despite Lily's amused objections that it wasn't a fashion show. And as he watched the two sisters, so captivated by that moment of normalcy and simple joy, Asher realized something crucial. He wasn't just offering a home to two girls in need. He was receiving something in return, something he hadn't known was missing in his life. A family. Not a traditional family, certainly, and perhaps not one the world would easily understand. But a family nonetheless, born not from blood ties but from something just as strong. Compassion, mutual understanding, and a decision to stay together, to care, to love. Later that night, after the girls finally fell asleep, Elise in her hospital bed, Lily in the recliner beside her, both wearing new pajamas Asher had bought, he stayed awake, gazing out the window at the city lights below. Tomorrow would be the first day of something new, the first step on an uncharted path. There would be challenges, of course, legal matters, emotional wounds to heal, trust to be built day by day. But for the first time in a long while, Asher did not feel alone facing the future. He had Lily, with her quiet courage and unshakable determination. He had Elise, with her contagious joy and surprising resilience. He had a family, born in the midst of pain and hope like a flower finding its way through concrete, defying all odds. And he realized with a warm certainty deep in his heart, this was only the beginning. The days following Elise's discharge from the hospital were days of quiet adjustment. Asher's home, a large duplex apartment on the 20th floor of a high-end building downtown, welcomed the girls with comforts they had never experienced before. For Elise, everything was a source of wonder, from the impressive view offered by the floor-to-ceiling windows to small details like the whirlpool bathtub, the minibar in the guest room now designated as hers, and the smart TV where she could watch cartoons whenever she liked. Her recovery advanced rapidly in this peaceful, abundant environment. Color completely returned to her cheeks, and her natural energy grew stronger every day. For Lily, the adaptation was more complex. Material comfort was certainly welcome, but it brought the challenge of allowing herself to relax, accepting care after so long acting like an adult. Gradually, though, the tension in her shoulders eased. She began sleeping through the night, no longer waking abruptly to check Elise's breathing. She allowed herself small moments of untroubled joy, laughing at a movie, devouring a book from Asher's extensive library, or simply gazing at the city below while sipping a cup of hot chocolate. As for Asher, the girl's presence completely transformed what had once been just a place to sleep. The apartment, originally purchased more for status than affection, now truly felt like a home. Elise's laughter echoed through the halls. Lily's books were strewn across the coffee table, colorful drawings hung on the refrigerator, little signs of life that filled a void he never knew existed. Legally, their situation was still a work in progress. David, his lawyer, was working tirelessly on all the paperwork for temporary guardianship. That involved meetings with social workers, documents to fill out, testimonies to gather. It was complex, but it moved forward successfully. Asher's solid reputation, his financial means, and the obvious improvement in the girl's condition all played in their favor. On the 10th morning after leaving the hospital, Asher woke with a crystal-clear conviction. The idea had been forming for a while, but now it was as solid as a final decision. It was no longer if, but when and how. He decided it would happen that evening, after dinner. He asked his housekeeper to prepare something special: lasagna, Elise's favorite, and apple pie for dessert, which Lily had once mentioned she enjoyed. The day went by with apparent normalcy, except for a slight nervousness Asher tried to hide. He took some work calls, reviewed documents from his team, but his thoughts repeatedly returned to what he intended to say to the girls that night. When they finally sat down at the dinner table, the atmosphere was light. Elise was excitedly chatting about a science program she'd watched that afternoon, explaining with childlike enthusiasm how bees made honey. Lily gently corrected a few points, revealing knowledge acquired from books. Asher watched their interaction with a smile, reflecting on how fortunate he was for that seemingly random encounter in the rain just a few weeks prior. Once they had finished dessert and cleared the dishes, leaving just the three of them at the table, Asher sensed the moment had arrived. "I have something important to tell you," he began, his voice sounding more serious than he intended. Lily immediately tensed. Despite all their progress, her first instinct was still to expect bad news. Elise, by contrast, simply looked at him with innocent curiosity. "Is it something bad?" Lily asked cautiously. "No," Asher assured her at once. "I'm hoping it's something very good. At least it would be for me." He paused, searching for the right words. He had rehearsed mentally several times, but now, facing the girls' expectant gazes, everything he'd prepared felt inadequate. "You know, I've been discussing your situation with my lawyer," he went on, carefully choosing each word, "about temporary guardianship and how to ensure you stay together." Lily nodded, tense. Elise scooted closer to her sister, instinctively. "Well, in these last weeks, I realized something important," Asher said, feeling his voice waver with emotion. "I realized that what we're building here isn't just a temporary arrangement. It's something deeper, more meaningful." He drew a long breath, mustering his courage. This was it. "I don't just want to help you," he declared, looking from Lily to Elise. "I want to be your family. If you'll allow me, I want to adopt you both." His words floated in the air like delicate soap bubbles, shining and fragile. A moment of absolute silence followed, as though even breathing had ceased. Elise reacted first. Her eyes widened, then a huge smile lit her face. You want to be our dad? She asked, her voice quivering with excitement. Yes, Asher responded, smiling back. If that's what you want, legally, officially, forever. Elise turned to Lily, awaiting her reaction. The older sister was very still, her face unreadable, but her eyes glistened with tears she fought to contain. Lily, Asher prodded gently, what do you think? I'll understand if you need time or if you don't. Yes, Lily interrupted, her voice a whisper, tears finally spilling over. Yes. Asher felt something expand inside him, filling every hollow space he had carried for years, a happiness so intense it bordered on pain. Yes, he repeated, to be sure. Yes, Lily said again, more firmly now, a trembling smile on her lips. We want to be your family. I want you to be our dad. Elise, unable to contain her excitement, jumped from her chair and ran into Asher's arms, nearly toppling him with the force of her hug. Can we call you Dad now? She asked, laughing through tears. Of course you can, he said, hugging her close and feeling his own vision blur. If that's what you want. He looked at Lily, still seated, tears streaming freely down her face. He extended his free arm toward her in a silent invitation. Slowly, as if in a dream, Lily stood and approached. When she joined the hug at last, Asher felt a circle close, like a homecoming after a long journey through uncharted lands. They stayed that way for a long time, the three of them holding each other, laughing and crying at once, a fusion of emotions so intense it defied words. It wasn't merely relief or gratitude or even happiness. It was something simpler and more complex, recognizing that families can form not by blood alone but by choice, day after day, moment after moment, choosing to remain, to care, to love. That night, after the girls finally fell asleep, not in separate bedrooms but together in Elise's bigger bed, as though they needed the closeness to process everything, Asher stood by the door, watching them. Their faces were peaceful, free of the worry and fear so familiar until recently. Tomorrow there would be more papers to sign, more legal procedures to navigate. There would be decisions about schools, routines, and the process of constructing a whole new life for the three of them. There would be challenges, misunderstandings, adjustments, hard moments every family goes through. But none of that mattered now. The hardest part, opening their hearts, trusting, choosing love over fear, was already done. Their truly new life was just beginning. Autumn had arrived, turning the city's trees into bursts of red and gold. The air was cooler that Monday morning, carrying that familiar scent of dry leaves and new possibilities that only September can bring. Lily stood before the mirror in her new bedroom, adjusting the collar of her white school shirt. It wasn't the same worn-stained uniform she'd once had, but a new one, tailored to fit, made of a fabric that didn't itch, and with neat seams. On the bed, a navy blue backpack lay waiting, stuffed with notebooks, pencils, and all the supplies required by her new school. Her own reflection startled her. Her hair, once hastily tied in a ponytail, now fell in soft waves over her shoulders. The dark circles under her eyes were gone, as was the constant worry that had aged her prematurely. She was still Lily, but a version of herself she'd never been allowed to be. A light knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Can I come in?" came Asher's voice. "Sure," she answered. Asher entered Isos, followed by Elise, already wearing her own uniform for the elementary school adjacent to Lily's. The younger girl practically bounced with excitement. "Look, Lily, we're twins!" Elise exclaimed, spinning around to show off her identical uniform, just in a smaller size. Lily smiled, feeling that familiar warmth in her chest that always came from Elise's presence, but now that warmth wasn't accompanied by the usual pang of anxiety, the ever-present fear of failing to protect her. "You look beautiful, Ellie," she said, adjusting the bow on her sister's collar, which had shifted during her enthusiastic spinning. "You look beautiful too," Asher said, his eyes conveying a pride that brought a slight blush to Lily's cheeks. "Ready for the big day?" Lily took a deep breath. A simple question, but laden with meaning. Was she ready to go back to school, to face curious stares, questions about her absence, ready to leave Elise behind even knowing she'd be safe? I think so, she replied, with more confidence than she felt. Are you nervous? Asher asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. A little, Lily admitted. What if I can't keep up? I've missed so much, and what if the other kids ask about everything? If you can't keep up, we'll arrange tutoring, Asher said gently. And as for questions, you only share what you're comfortable sharing. Nobody is entitled to your entire story. And if someone's mean to you, Elise added with a 7-year-old's logic, just call me and I'll come defend you. Lily laughed at the image of her little sister charging in like a miniature knight in a school uniform. Thanks, Ellie. But I'll be okay. Yes, you will, Asher confirmed, and I'll be around if you need anything, anytime. The certainty in his voice calmed some of Lily's nerves. It was still strange but comforting to have someone who cared enough to adjust his important schedule just so she could feel safe on her first day. We'd better go or we'll be late, she announced, picking up her backpack. The drive was filled with Elise's cheerful chatter while Lily remained quiet, gazing at the city through the window. It wasn't the same route she once walked with her mother. That belonged to another life, one that now felt like a distant dream. When they stopped before the imposing gates of Westwood School, Lily felt her heart pound. It was one of the city's top schools, with a large campus and impressive facilities, quite different from the public school she had attended before. We're here, Asher said. We'll drop Elise off at the elementary building first and then go to yours, okay? Lily nodded, grateful for a small delay. She watched as Asher led Elise to the colorful primary building. She saw her sister hesitate briefly, then hug Asher one last time before heading off with her new teacher, already chatting animatedly. Your turn, Asher said, returning to Lily's side. They walked together toward the main building. Other students hurried by, some glancing curiously at the new girl and the man at her side. Lily tightened her grip on her backpack straps. You know, Asher remarked as they approached the entrance, when I was around your age, I switched schools too. My mum got a better job in another district, and I ended up in a place where I knew nobody. Lily looked at him, surprised. Asher rarely mentioned his childhood. How was it? She asked. Scary, he admitted with a slight smile. On my first day, I was so nervous I almost asked to go home. But then I realized it was my chance to be whoever I really wanted to be, without all the baggage of what people thought they knew about me. It was a blank page. They reached the steps leading to the main doors. Through the glass entrance, Lily could see students moving around in the lobby. Kind of like you told Dr. Morris last week, right? Asher continued. That sometimes you wished you could start over, be just Lily, not the girl who sells candy, or the girl who takes care of her sick sister. Lily remembered. It had been a tough session, where she had finally put many bottled-up thoughts into words. Well, this is your chance, Asher concluded. A blank page. It's a new story you can write any way you want. The words resonated inside her. A blank page. She wasn't erasing the past. It would always be part of her, in her mother's memory, in the lessons she'd learned, in her love for Elise. But now there was room for more, for discovering who Lily was when she wasn't just surviving. I'm ready, she said, and this time she truly meant it. At the entrance, they met the headmistress, who was waiting. After the introductions and a few last details, the time came to say goodbye. I'll be here when school's out, Asher promised. You have my number, and the school knows how to reach me if you need anything. I know. I'll be fine. After a moment's hesitation, she leaned in and hugged him, a gesture she was still learning to initiate. Thank you, she whispered against his shirt. For what? He asked, hugging her back. For this. For everything. They separated, and Lily turned to follow the headmistress. At the last moment, she glanced back at Asher, who was still standing on the steps, watching her. She gave one final wave, and then crossed through the open doors of the school, not to sell candy on a wet corner, not to endure pitying looks, but to learn, to grow, to discover who she might become now that the future was not just a threat but a horizon of possibilities. Asher watched until she disappeared into the building, then returned to the car to join Elise. How was it? Elise asked as he got in. My teacher is really nice, Elise exclaimed. She has red hair and showed me where I'll sit. There's a girl named Sarah who might be my friend, I think. Asher smiled, starting the engine. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Will Lily make friends too? Elise asked, looking at the building that now housed her sister. I'm sure she will, Asher replied. Your sister is special. People will notice that right away. As he drove off, he glanced in the rearview mirror at the school shrinking behind them. She'll be okay, Dad, Elise asked, using a name that still felt new and wonderful to Asher. Yes, dear, he answered, trusting in Lily's extraordinary strength. She'll be more than okay. And on that autumn morning, as the sun rose in a bright sky, 3 lives brought together by a storm continued onward, no longer just fighting to survive, but finally learning to truly live. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.